Introduction to Schema.org, getting familiar with the documentation. There's a few different things that you should know to do with Schema.org. So, of course, Schema.org is the vocabulary, and within that, you can go into any one of the properties or its classes by typing in schema.org / and then the class name or the property name. Classes start with a capital letter, and properties always start with a lowercase letter and then have this camel case pattern. So we'll see that in just a moment. But there are classes and there are properties. Classes are the types of things that you're describing. So as you can see in this tree down the side, this is there's a thing at the top. Every data item has a class, and every class is a subclass of something else, and at some point it's a thing. So a thing can then be broken down into a number of these kind of primary classes. So there's an action, creative work, event, intangible, medical entity, organization, and from those you can see there's a hierarchy of that can be broken out for each one of those as they get more and more specific. So the organization here is shown to have a number of subclasses that are a more specific type of organization. Local business is a great example. So local business is also a subclass of place. And so a place is in, another location here in the tree. And a location business is then decomposed or has subclasses of a number of other types. Automotive business is the one that we've chosen, and then an auto dealer. So you can see that there's some inheritance between these classes. So an auto dealer has all of the types of properties of an organization, as well as a thing, and also a local business and the automotive business. So as you get more specific, you will get sometimes more specific properties that are relevant only to those things. Properties indicate the attributes of the relation or relationships of the thing. So if you're describing an auto dealer, the properties of that are can be things that describe its name. It can be things that describe the business, a description, business description. It can be the URL, and those are properties that indicate the attributes and relationships between things. So there can be a simple data item property that has a value. So a literal value is usually what we would refer to it. So if it's a name, that's just a text string, that's a literal value, or it can be another class or another object. So those would be object properties. So when you're making a relationship perhaps between a number of auto dealers that are part of a larger organization, so for instance the Ford Motor Company would be the organization, and relating that to another auto dealer is an object type of property. So we've seen that they're organized in a hierarchy. Some classes have multiple parent classes, so I mentioned local business has a parent of organization as well as a place. Subclasses, for example, medical organization, inherit the properties of its parent classes, and that's also what I was describing with the auto dealer. Classes often have examples at the bottom of the page. So if it doesn't have, then you can go to its parent class and check for samples there. So when you're going through the hierarchy on Schema.org, at the bottom of the page, they usually have where that class, first it actually has, as you're going down the page, first it's a number of properties for the most specific type at the top, and then going down in the more generic types of classes that it inherits from. So first you'll see the properties that are eligible in auto dealer, then the automotive business, then the local business, then the organization, then the thing, going down in the first section. In the next section you're going to see where this class might be used for incoming references, and then you're going to see where there's more specific types of the class, and then you'll see a number of examples. And if there's no samples there or examples, go to its parent class, and that's what I'm describing here. So that's how you can kind of get to know the schema hierarchy by going up and down the class tree. Schema.org properties. So these are the restrictions for classes that it expects to be used on. So its domain. There are property restrictions for the expected types of its values, and this is referred to as its range. So if you look over here in this area served, so area served is a property, the geographic area where a service or offered item is provided. The value is expected to be one of these types, so the administrative area is possibly the value that is being referred to by the area served. And there's a whole bunch of these classes that could use area served. So as an example, an organization may have the area served of a place called Ontario. They may have an offer may only be valid in the administrative area of Washington, D.C. or something else, some other government regulated type of administrative area. So you can kind of see that, so the domain here is where it says used on these types. So the domain of area served is contact point, delivery charge, specification, demand, offer, and so on. Its range are those values that are expected. So the administrative area, geoshape, place, and text. And values sometimes in the range sometimes have restrictions on the format. So a date is required to be in ISO 8601 format. The opening hours have its own codes in its description. So when you're looking for what these values might be, look through in the comments on the property. So this is on a property page that we're seeing an area served, or within the class description, you may also see the specific expected formats. So properties are polymorphic, which means that they can have one or more domains in ranges. So area served is a great example. You can see how it's got multiple different values on either end of it. So it's also got its own subproperties, so available at or from, eligible region, and supersedes service area. So there's just properties kind of have their own meaning, and that's very deliberate, so that you can better classify the relationships between things. And sometimes you'll also hear properties referred to as relations or predicates. So these are terms from other bodies of interest. There's three different syntax alternatives. Microdata and RDFA are the forms of markup designed to be within your HTML, so they happen to be within your templated code, so they may be attached to different HTML elements, so a div or a span. You'll often find them attached to kind of declare that the content within those elements is related to that particular schema class or property. And microdata and RDFA were the first of the markups to be released or to be part of the syntaxes that are valid for providing schema.org. And they're great for dynamic page templates in your product catalog, for instance. So if you have like 10 to 1,000 or more pages of a particular type, it's often quite easy to go into your page template, and especially if this is a dynamic or database-driven web page, that you just fill in the microdata in the markup, and then the database just kind of fills in where it's appropriate. So that's where I typically would use your microdata, actually. And RDFA I haven't used, and it's less common than microdata, but they're nearly equivalent. JSON-LD, though, is the newer and simpler markup format, and this is what we use as much as possible. So this is a JavaScript object notation, which is kind of a part of the JavaScript scripting language. And what you do is you can create this syntax of linked data within a JSON array, or this JavaScript object within a script tag anywhere in HTML. So you'll see an example in the next page, but the benefits of this is that it doesn't have to be mixed in with the user visible text. So it's less brittle, and you're going to be able to allow the designer to make updates to the layout of the page without having to worry about breaking the structured data. It's much easier also to express nested data items. It's also easier to express relationships that are more in a recursive pattern. So like an employer has an employee of a person who might be, also relating back as an employee of the or working for the organization. So you can express some of these different patterns easier in JSON-LD. And Google can read JSON-LD even when it's dynamically injected. So this is quite nice. So this is the asynchronous deployment that we talked about before. And so you may have JavaScript code or embedded widgets that only draw in the content after the page is loaded, and Google is still able to read that. And so this is a nice way to deploy it in a number of circumstances. And this is not something that you could do with microdata or RDFA. Here's the three of the syntaxes side by side. On the left, we have microdata, which is what I'd like to use for bulk kind of pages. So we have 1,000 products you want to mark up, and they all have a very similar page layout, page structure. You would just add all these sections in the bold to help declare that this section of the page has the scope of an organization. And then you put in the item property of the name, and the stuff inside of that span is google.org and then Goog. So that's the things that are within that HTML element are considered to be the value of that property. So you can see, you could read it this way, that there's an organization that has the name google.org, that has the address of this thing that's a type of postal address. That's postal address has a street address of 38 Avenue de Louvre, and then the postal code of F75002, and so on. So the same code in RDFA is in the middle. You would see that they have this vocab and type of, and then property, and those three are kind of the equivalent of the item scope, item type, and item prop of microdata. Very similar kind of HTML inline changes and attributes to the elements. JSON-LD is on the right, and it's just a block of data basically that is not shown to the user, but in the policies it's clear that Google wants you to also have that in the data, so they don't want you to be gaming the and kind of spamming the markup. However, if you're doing it and you're deliberately trying to do a good job, it's a nice kind of compact way to provide the data. So you can see the exact same organization with the same postal address in Paris, with the street address I struggle with to pronounce, and then the email, fax number, name, and telephone. So you can see there's different alternatives, and wherever possible, I prefer JSON-LD. And as of February, it's now able to provide the very equivalent features and to power the same things as microdata and RDFA. So for the first few years, you could only get rich snippets with microdata. Then eventually JSON-LD was introduced, and then after about a year, they began to pick up with adoption and allowing webmasters to provide the same markup and get the rich snippets. And just the last one was the products and in reviews rich snippets, so the stars and product information. That's now finally, as of February, something you can still get with any one of these syntaxes. And so that's a very nice way to do it. Another essential documentation that you should be familiar with is the Google Developer Structured Data. So here we have on the right-hand side two parts of the table of contents of this Google Developer Structured Data. And you can see just a number, how many of these are features. And you can see a few of these things are about policies and just introductory overview type of information. And then at the very bottom, you'll see the testing tool links. And so this area you really got to know as well. So get familiar with the overviews. Have a look into some of these rich snippets. And within each one of these different features, you'll actually be able to read into what are the required fields, what type of classes this is relevant to, and also see some examples of what they're looking for. So familiarize yourself with the policies, get an idea of the different features that you can leverage with Google. There's a bunch of examples, as mentioned, for the rich snippets, the knowledge panels, actions in the inbox is actually on the email side of the Google developer site, but it's very similar to this. And then the structured data testing tool is there. So that's will be covered in the tools section. But without a doubt, this is another go-to guide just alongside the scheme.org. You must know this as well.